I had been called in for a school meeting before. Every parent has. Report cards, behavior issues, the occasional conflict on the playground that needed adult conversation. These things happen. I was not alarmed when the vice principal called and asked if I could come in Thursday afternoon. I was alarmed when I walked into the conference room. There were 5 people at that table: the vice principal, my son's homeroom teacher, a school counselor I recognized from the newsletter, a woman I didn't know who turned out to be a child psychologist the school brought in for specific situations, and one empty chair. The one clearly meant for me, positioned across from all of them, slightly separated, like the setup of a conversation where one side has already decided what it knows and is waiting for the other side to arrive. Nobody smiled when I sat down. Nobody would look at me directly. And I understood, before a single word was spoken, that this meeting was not about my son. It was about what my son had told them about me. My name is Daniel. I'm 38. My son Noah is 11 years old. I have been raising him alone for 3 years since his mother and I separated in a process that was not clean or easy, but that eventually arrived at something functional: shared custody, a schedule, the particular co-parenting arrangement that 2 people build when they have decided to stop being partners but cannot stop being parents. Noah lived primarily with me. He was with his mother every other weekend and one evening a week. This had been the arrangement for 3 years, and it had worked in the way that arrangements work when both parties are committed to making them work regardless of the personal cost. I drove to the school thinking the meeting was about Noah's grades. He'd been struggling in math since the start of the term. I knew that. We'd talked about it. I'd arranged tutoring. I assumed this was the next step in that conversation. I parked. I walked in. I smiled at the front desk. I sat down in the empty chair, and the vice principal said, "Thank you for coming, Mr. Calloway. We want to talk to you about some things Noah has shared with us over the past several weeks." She said it carefully. Everything about that room was careful. The way they were sitting, the way they were choosing words, the way the child psychologist had a notepad open but wasn't writing anything yet. Over the past 6 weeks, Noah had been speaking with the school counselor, not because he'd been referred, because he'd been showing up at her door during lunch, voluntarily, and asking to talk. What he had talked about was home, not dramatically, not in the way of a child reporting a crisis, in the way of a child who had been carrying something too heavy for one person and had finally found a door he trusted enough to knock on. He had told them that I cried at night, that he had heard me through the wall on nights he couldn't sleep, and that he had been lying in his bed for months, listening and not knowing what to do. He had told them that I didn't eat dinner most evenings, that I made food for him and then sat at the table and moved things around my plate and put the leftovers away. He had told them that sometimes I forgot things: his permission slips, his PE kit, the dental appointment he'd reminded me about 3 times, not angrily, just factually. The way a child reports evidence he has gathered because he is worried and doesn't have a word for worried that feels big enough. He had told the counselor, "I think my dad is sad and he doesn't want me to know." The vice principal said, "We want to be clear. Noah is not in trouble. Noah is an exceptional child who is worried about his father and didn't know where else to take that worry. We are not here to make any judgments about your parenting. We are here because we think you should know what he's been carrying." The child psychologist spoke for the first time. She said, "Noah shows all the signs of a child who is functioning well. His schoolwork is maintained, his friendships are intact, he's engaged in class, but he's also functioning as a caretaker. He's monitoring you. He's managing his own distress about your distress. That's a significant weight for an 11-year-old. I sat at that table and listened to 5 professionals describe my son's interior life with an accuracy that told me he had been honest with them in a way he hadn't felt he could be honest with me, because he was protecting me, My 11-year-old son had decided that the right thing to do with his worry about his father was to carry it quietly so that his father wouldn't feel worse. He had learned it from me. I drove home. Noah was there when I arrived. He'd gotten back from school an hour earlier, the way he always did. He was at the kitchen table doing homework. He looked up when I came in. He looked at my face, and I watched him do the thing the psychologist had described. I watched his expression adjust quickly to something neutral, something that wouldn't ask me for more than I could give. I sat down across from him. I said, "I had a meeting at school today." He said, "I know." I said, "They told me what you've been talking to Mrs. Heller about." He was quiet. I said, "Noah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." He said, "Okay." I said, "Are you okay?" He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, in the voice of a child who has been waiting to be asked the right question for a very long time, "I'm okay. I'm just worried about you." I said, "I know. I'm sorry." He said, "You don't have to be sorry." I said, "I do, because you've been doing my job. You've been taking care of me when I should have been making sure you didn't have to." He looked at his homework. Then he looked back at me. He said, "Are you sad, Dad?" I said, "Yes, I have been, but I'm going to do something about it." He said, "Okay." Then he said, "Do you want dinner? I can make the pasta thing." He was 11 years old and offering to make dinner. I said, "Let's make it together." I started seeing a therapist 2 weeks after that meeting. Not because the school suggested it, though they did, but because I sat across from my son at the kitchen table and watched him offer to make dinner, and understood that somewhere in 3 years of trying to function, I had let him become the person watching out for me. That is not a weight an 11-year-old should carry. He had gone to Mrs. Heller not to report me, to get help for me, because he didn't know any other way to help. He had done it quietly, consistently, for 6 weeks without telling me, because he didn't want me to feel bad about needing help. He learned that from me, too. I've been in therapy for 4 months now. Noah knows. He asked me once how it was going, and I told him honestly, "Some days are harder than others, but overall it is helping." He nodded with the seriousness of someone receiving a medical update from a patient they've been monitoring. He is still 11. He is also in certain moments the most perceptive person in any room he walks into. I walked into a school meeting expecting to talk about math. Instead, I found out that my son had been taking care of me the only way he knew how, by finding someone bigger to hand the worry to, so that he didn't have to carry it alone anymore. I walked in and sat in the empty chair. I left understanding I needed to fill it differently.